Really appreciate the neighbors' efforts too, who have, we've asked questions, we've tried to get answers, and I really appreciate the feedback from our neighbors living within Waterbury as well. But I also ask to please consider those of us who have signed the petition and who are going to be directly affected. But not only for us, but for the city as a whole. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I just want to let you know I'm going to be the last one to speak as far as I know, to avoid trying to be so repetitive, of course. I'm Scott Sipker. I live at 515, which is confusing, 60th Avenue, right here. And I guess I just want to emphasize, I realize that emotions and stuff get high, and this really isn't personal. It's not, and I feel terrible just being opposed to an entrepreneur. But if I'm just speaking practically from an Iowan point of view, the math on the parking, yes, I get that it goes to code, but the math doesn't work out. If you're looking at 250 people going into this place, we know we're Iowans. How many of us drove all by ourselves in one car tonight, or two? We're not great at carpooling. And what's going to happen is there's a shuttle that's going to go across the street. Are Iowans more likely to drive down Grand, get into that parking lot, get out of their car, wait for a shuttle, then sit in the shuttle, have a shuttle drive them across a block to get out to go to this beautiful location? Iowans are good. They're gonna jaywalk across Grand. That's what's gonna happen. Or more likely, probably they're going to take a right or a left on 61st Street. If the parking lot's full, they're gonna park on 61st Street. If it's not there, they're gonna park on Walnut Hill, which again, no sidewalks, as Mark referenced. And then they're gonna swing around on 60th Street and fill up that spot. That's what Iowans are gonna do. And it's what I would do. And that is, I think, the biggest point of view. Now, just as I close, just imagine 11 o'clock at night, now people are at an awesome party, and now they're gonna filter back out. If they did take the shuttle option, maybe they take the shuttle back over, but more likely they jaywalk across Grand Avenue. Or they filter into our neighborhood to get into their car. And Taylor says she's looking for the perfect location. I can appreciate that. But from all the gymnastics required to make this location work and make it the dream, it tells me it's not the perfect location. This feels like a square peg getting into a round hole. And we can press and press and press, but I just don't think it works here. Thank you. Oh, I guess you're going, Anthony?
I am, yeah. So, I know, right? So, my name's Anthony Carroll. I live right here on 525 60th, and you already know I'm a fool because I'm going to try to follow Scott, which is probably not the smartest thing to do. But I did speak before you. I want to thank your time. I won't be redundant to what I talked about last time. I want to thank you for listening last time. I do want to spend at least a good portion of time thanking the applicant for what she's done and really the work she's done, put in prior to this meeting, since that meeting, the last meeting, and now. And there's no doubt, if this is a question of quality of the applicant and her determination, that's unimpeachable. I can honestly say I would make a recommendation to hire her, and I will. There's no doubt in terms of event planning, but it's not about the applicant. And I think it's unfortunate if it ever becomes about that. I truly, and again, to get up here when you know people live this vicinity are not happy about, that's a brave thing, so I applaud her for doing that. That's a very hard thing to do, but that's really the point. It's not about the applicant. Your question, as you know, it's not even about whether to build this event center. Since the last meeting, I attended a meeting at a couple blocks north of here, and it became very clear, who said this is going to happen in terms of building. That was repeated. My wife, who's not here, you have the B squad again tonight. My wife is home with our sick 5-year-old after working all day, trying to get her to sleep. You're stuck with me, so it was an unplanned person to come today. What I would say is, I live here, and it's not a question of whether to build. this event center? That's not your question, right? And again, it's been told this is going to happen. The question is whether to rezone this, whether to change what is currently a buffer of commercial mix or residential mix to commercial mix. That is your question. And the transformation, I'm not going to be redundant about parking, but the thing that was really glossed over on it is the very heart of the question you have before of you. Whether to transform the neighborhood and allow the sale of booze to upwards of 250, hopefully for her sake, every weekend. That is the question you have. So I want her to succeed. I do. It doesn't matter what I want. There's no doubt she will. Her star is bright. I cheer for him. I truly do. What I would love to know is, we're all neighbors, right? You're my neighbor. I work in East Village. I'm a neighbor. We're all neighbors. But who lives in this circle wants this? Not one. If I'm wrong, please approach me. I will cheer for you. I kept waiting to hear one person who lives in the circle who wants this to be transformed. Because that is the point. You're asking us to become the buffer. That is really what you're doing. Become the buffer to not just parking, but drunk people. That is what happens. That's foreseeable, it's inevitable, it's designed. That's the question you have. So I oppose it, not because I oppose this person's willpower, and very polite. She can even say, she's talked to my wife, she's talked to me, she listened to a lot of people, but listening and making a better case for your business is not the same thing of whether we should support 250 people moving into the neighborhood. The closest there was any discussion of the booze tonight was Viva. Did you hear that Viva is, by the way, I walked there with my family to Viva. Did you hear that Viva is just fine? Viva is over here. It's not even here. There's a lot of discussion about the flower shop. The flower shop's not where the business goes. That's parking. The flower shop the event center is here. And again, I guess I would ask you to pose it. It's a simple question. If you don't oppose it, please ask for good neighbor agreements. That is the only thing that could possibly try to bring some certainty, rather than just proclaim yourself to be a good neighbor as a business. So I heard from businesses, but the people who have to sleep there every night are the people that you'll have to deal with. And I'm trying to avoid the problems that comes with that transformation. So I respectfully ask for you to oppose this motion to rezone. Not a motion of whether the applicant's an amazing person. I'm for it. I want to sign up for the applicant. Not opposing whether to put an event center. That's happening. It's been told repeatedly that it's happening. The question is, do you transfer our neighborhood into the buffer zone to the rest of Waterbury? And I really hope you consider that decision not lightly before you move forward. And I thank you again for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate your time. You have a tough job. Again, I come home, I combat people every day, and I come home to not be divided. But that's the thing, is the divisive does not end by passing this. It only entrenches it. So I hope, again, yes, I'm NIMBY. Everyone's labeled, we're put in a box. I'm NIMBY because it is my backyard. So I'm gonna fight for my backyard, I'm gonna fight for my wife, not because it's personal, but because I'm trying to help the applicant, I'm trying to help my family. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, still need you to sign.
Members of the Commission, I'm Tony Colasino, 801 Grand Avenue, Suite 3700. I'm here on behalf of Ed and Gretchen Johnson, who own property Walnut Hill Drive, and their daughter, son-in-law, Sarah and Eric Flores, who also live on Walnut Hill Drive. And they're against this. And I don't want to say anything that might talk you into approving this, but it just seems like a lot of us sat here through the discussions, and Taylor gave a very cogent presentation on what she's going to do here. But you notice, if you go back through her presentation, she never mentioned anything about hours. And that's one of the big concerns. You know, turning people loose have been liquored up late at night, who will cause problems, narrow streets. So in our view, there ought to be what we've been calling a good neighbor agreement that ought to address certain things, such as the number of guests, limited to a maximum of 250 persons, if that's what they say they're going to have. The premises would be used for celebratory events, which is what they've said, and hours would be weekdays, Sundays and weekdays, close up 10 o'clock, Friday and Saturday, close up at 11 o'clock, which is what I think maybe it was it Rachel, one of her people that spoke for her, indicated that that would be the end of the hour. Parking plan would allow for 95 spots on site, we would hope. That there'd be a backup parking plan by an agreement, enforceable agreement, presumably across the street at the old IMT site. Guests would not be allowed to park in the streets. Off-duty police coverage would be required to maintain order and to enforce some of these conditions. No outside activities would be permitted, or at least not permitted in the evening when the noise might carry through. Building would be constructed in a manner to contain the noise. We've heard that that can be done, so we're just saying, let's put something that's going to bind people to do this. Maybe Taylor's got all the good intentions of in the world, but she decides to go out of this business, somebody else comes in there, and as you know, the zoning continues on, and if there are any conditions here, then the next person, it's just as good as their promise, what they have to do. Landscaping would be important, around the site. We would think there's only one tree that's a dead tree there that would be allowed to be cut down. And then landscaping around would, buffer landscaping that the zoning board does this all the time on properties that do provide both a buffer and, noise would assist with the noise. Lighting would be designed to minimize annoyance to the residential areas. And the agreement would be termed to run with the land, so it could be enforced against any subsequent purchasers or operators of the business. So again, while my people are not in favor of this, we do, if you're going to do anything, we would want you to impose a good neighbor agreement on this, and we've got terms written up we could give to you if that would help. So, thank you.
Anybody else to speak? Please come forward, line up to the side so we can keep things moving.
Is it possible to speak if you don't live in on those streets right there?
Yes, yes.
Good evening again. My name is Gina Newell and I live at 535 Waterbury Circle. I feel the need to speak this evening because I feel like I owe my neighbors. I owe them an explanation. I came last week when we just found out about this whole situation and expressed my concerns, and I decided, you know what, I need to go back. No one in our area knows what's going on. They don't really understand the details. And again, we applaud Taylor. She's obviously a lovely young lady. I know a lot of people that know her. I hear that over and over. I applaud her for what she's doing. But we also, excuse me a second. From canvassing my neighbors and talking with them, I also know that there is a huge concern about protecting the integrity of our neighborhood, which means small, confined, we know each other, we help each other, we go over and above. And what the consensus, and I went door to door, and I also hosted an event at our home because I wanted to get the feedback, good, and pro and con. Are you in support of this? Great, please share with me. If you're not, I would really love to hear your concerns. And I have been driving some of these events to gather that information. Last night, we did, the Waterbury Circle Association, or Waterbury Association hosted a meeting and invited us to come back because they said, okay, we hear enough of your concerns. And they admitted to us that when Taylor met with them, they didn't have all the details. And I think the big detail was how big an event center was going to be. And so then, once they heard all our concerns, they started digging around, and so we met and they said, yeah, you've got some legitimate worries. So I believe they drafted another letter to you, and I believe it's in the file now saying, hey, we've had to think about this ourselves, and you're right, there are some concerns. So I think from my personal canvassing of the neighborhood, and I walked to more than 40 houses. Granted, not everybody was home, but I talked to a lot of people. And I think the sense is, even if Taylor was building something that housed maybe parties or events up to 100 people, that would feel more reasonable to us. Like, okay, you can handle the parking right there. Maybe it's not going to be congesting traffic so bad, because we also envision that during the day there's going to be vans and caterers and DJs setting up and all this kind of stuff, which will add. And maybe if it's raining, people are going to want to just drop these lovely ladies in their high heels off at the front door, and they're going to wander up and try and find a place to park this close. I don't know. And a big concern also is the alcohol. You know, again, you can't control all of your customers. And now tonight, or we just found out about the movie, their patio. Now she wants to have a patio and put movies out there. Well, how are we going to do a noise on that? And if there is a patio, are the people that are over imbibing going to wander out there and have a smoke and then start yelling and talk? I just don't know. We just don't know. And it's a lot of people's experience when those facilities are available, that's kind of what happens. So that, I just wanted to relay that to you. I think had it been something, I think the size of it is what really concerns us. Being that large, that many people coming and going throughout the day, every single weekend, it just changes the dynamics of our beautiful, quiet, lovely little neighborhood. And McDonald's and Viva, yeah, they're busy, but it's not a congested, you know, people just swing in McDonald's, drive through, and off they go. That's, you know, in Viva, they've managed to find parking in the bank and on the side streets, and that deals pretty well. This will throw a loop in that, I'm sure. I don't know what it'll do to Viva's business. But I just wanted to say to the neighbors, thank you for coming, because I really encourage them to get involved, get informed, try and find out what's going here. And I just want to say to Taylor, I think that's really our biggest concern, is just the enormity to us, the size of that many people coming on Grand, in and out, and now a patio, and there's lots of windows on that building. Again, are the doors going to be open, let people in and out to the patio now? Those things are just, seems like it's always changing.
Yeah, you have 1 minute to complete your comments.
So in closing, like I said, I think those were some of the biggest concerns that I heard when I gathered people or talked with them individually. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Connie Lee Whalen. I live just off Waterbury Circle on Ronwood Drive, and my concern is noise control. For the past 5 years, we have been battered by noise, and it's not so much noise as it is vibration from electronic bass, which is something that rattles the windows and comes through the walls. And you are dead tired and you are trying to go to sleep, and you cannot, because you have got this relentless pounding. And I'm talking about a venue that is fairly close to where Taylor wants to build. And we already have issues, huge issues in our neighborhood because of that venue. And I really don't want to add to that. It's when we're in our house, it sounds like it might be one of our neighbors having a party. Would that it were, because if it were one of our neighbors, we could deal with them. We could appeal to their sense of neighborliness, but that's not the case. We are dealing with with big folks and people who don't really care what kind, and I'm not talking Taylor here, but I'm talking about others who have not really cared about what impact they are having on a quiet, tranquil neighborhood. And if you can't have peace and quiet in your home, where can you have it these days? So I would like to respectfully request that you vote no on this rezoning to help us maintain the little peace and quiet we have left in our neighborhood. Thank you.
If there's no one else to speak, the applicant has 5 minutes for a rebuttal.
Is there any questions of staff that you would want to entertain before they had their chance to rebut?
I served on this commission for a number of years, and we have never addressed a good neighbor agreement.
Okay.
And so I just have questions about that.
Good question.
Yeah, I can.
Before, Taylor, before you speak, if we could have Eric address that
Or
question.
whether you're willing to. I think we've had neighbor agreements on other matters. I'm not familiar with them as part of rezoning. Certainly the commission has the ability to recommend conditions as part of rezoning. The owner would be obligated under the state code to accept those conditions in order for them to take effect. If the council believes they're not willing to accept conditions the council recommends, then they would, certainly could also deny the rezoning. But if they do agree to conditions, those conditions then would get recorded with the rezoning and carry with the land, as Mr. Colasino had indicated. We've sort of shifted in our new code, we've somewhat shifted away from getting too many conditions. We've put a lot more design elements in the review code for design review to avoid having specific landscaping. Many of our conditions in the past were part of the lack of standards that were in place for a lot of these things that were concerns. So we're not moving under this new code. We're trying to not get too many conditions, but certainly you still have the ability to recommend conditions. The Board of Adjustment would consider both any assembly use under either this current zoning, RX1, or under MX1. And that conditional use would then be able to have a clause in it where if there was a pattern of exhibiting a violation of conditions that the Board of Adjustment would impose with that conditional use, it could be brought back. Whereas if this was rezoned with certain conditions and they violated that, there really isn't the automatic ability to bring it back for reconsideration. I think the council would have to initiate that directly. So we would have to enforce on it more through the court system to deal with violations. With this conditional use, again, it also would be for the liquor consideration. If that were the case, then those conditional uses, I think from our zoning enforcement perspective, are easier for us to enforce when we get into the court system on anything. So that's why we've added a number of these in our new code so that there's an extra layer of protection, because we'd have another hearing to specifically address the use itself, not just the zoning of category of uses that might be considered or allowed. So again, the commission certainly can recommend things that kind of tie the hands of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Some of the stuff that staff has recommended would already do that. We're already saying that any conditional use, that we would recommend that any conditional use for the sale of alcohol would consider hours of operation, parking arrangements, and the business itself, the sales activities. We believe that, staff believes that's going to, give the Board of Adjustment direction as to ensuring that they at least take those matters. They're able to take other matters that would be brought to their attention in those consideration of uses. Again, this is, if this doesn't get rezoned, they still will have the ability to go to the zoning board for these assembly functions, which in that case, if they do want to sell liquor, they would use a catering, which would have to transfer their license to the location for the event. And it wouldn't probably seem any different in terms of how it's operated, but the difference would be that it would be a variation of potentially a variation of that, who's selling that liquor, whereas if it was one operator, there would be more consistency in that. So that's another kind of element to this, but so I don't want to, I'm a little worried that people, if it gets denied tonight, that people will get the impression that it's kind of it's over, but they will still have the ability to go to the board, ask for the conditional uses for the parking in the flood zone and the assembly, and then if they do get assembly, they will be able to then cater in the alcohol sales. They just won't benefit as part of their business model. Again, with the good neighbor agreement is something that, again, we haven't tied into the zoning. I'm not saying that it's not a doable thing. It's just not, it's another thing that will be expending our resources and our ability to enforce, but I don't want to discourage them from engaging the neighborhood in a private agreement, because that may be another tool that would be effective for the neighbors. But I haven't seen that. But if the zoning board or the commission wants to recommend that, then I think that would end up having to be crafted, and I think the council would probably have to look at that as part of the conditions and before being able to adopt it in an ordinance.
So Eric, when there's been neighbor agreements and previous, you said there's some times when you've seen a neighborhood
so there's
agreement.
there's been neighbor agreements on things involved where the city's in partnership with the neighborhood associations on projects or maintenance of areas throughout the city. We've had a good neighbor task force that's reviewed development in our agri-emergent industrial park over on Vandalia. So we've had that concept's been out there, but I've never seen it in the 25 years I've been here associated directly with the zoning, a zoning condition. And I'm not saying it can't be done, it just hasn't happened, so that's kind of new territory there. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Okay.
So I just wanted to address a couple of the things. Mark Cooper, we are putting in a sidewalk, which is going to go on 61st Street along our property line. Parking issues that have stemmed from Viva Restaurant, I have no control over that. Again, I mentioned previously that we plan to not use the bank's parking lot for overflow parking, and again, the secondary location for overflow, and then we're also working with Michael Hallsworth up the street and seeing if we can work something out with his property as well, so that it would be on the same side as us. Billy Kirby, you talked a little bit about the uptick of traffic. A restaurant can go in the space, and imagine how many more vehicles and cars there would be if it was a restaurant. And I'll tell you, restaurant owners, I know a lot of them that are amazing, but there's also some that are really not going to have a say or care what the neighbors think. So I think that's something really that you guys need to consider and think about before, completely throwing my idea out the door. Again, just 1 to 2 times a week, opposed to 7 days out of the week, and until 2 a.m. It's another option that can go that's already zoned correctly. And they can have alcohol because they're going to be serving over 50% of food. So again, that's just something to think about. Megan, I'm a mom as well. I would much rather have a small event center in my neighborhood than a restaurant. Especially, again, with a restaurant, there's going to be a huge uptick of traffic for that. Airbnb, that was something that was brought up. Really, I mean, it's not one of my issues. I actually know a lot of people around surrounding neighborhoods that, that like to live there. I mean, Glen Oaks is a prime example. They are outside until midnight, blaring the noise from the veranda, and people pay a lot of money to live in that space. Another thing is the hotel is within 1.3 miles of the property, which is actually closer than some of the neighbors that are here. So I don't, again, see that being much of an issue for hotels. A couple of other things I just wanted to address was, I keep addressing the parking issue over and over again. If there's something that we need to write up, that if we're over a certain capacity, we need to provide valet services. I've already been in touch with Keck Parking. I have a great relationship with Tom, Blake, Will, and Park. Yes, there's a guy named Park at Keck Parking. So, I've already been in touch with them about that. And again, I just want to, reiterate multiple times that this isn't my first rodeo. I do events multiple times, hundreds of times out of the year, and the number one question I do get from my clients is parking when it's downtown and when it's at the Tea Room, when it's at MC Club, downtown, and I always find ways to make sure that there is parking for the guests, because I do want everybody to be happy. A couple of other things that I know I'm probably running out of time is, we're going to continue to be a buffer to the neighborhood. We're going to do a ton of trees and landscaping, as I showed you guys previously on what the property's projected to look like. A couple things on the number of hours. I'm sorry I didn't mention that in my previous speech, but again, at the neighborhood meeting, I reiterated it multiple times that 10 p.m. cutoff on weeknights and then 11 p.m. on weekends with last call at 10:30. I think that's being more than accommodating for being in a commercial area where Viva Mexican restaurants open every single day until, I believe, 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock during the summertime. And then McDonald's just right down the road open until 1 a.m. So again, just kind of wanted to mention a little bit about that. Again, a couple of other things. You guys talked a lot about the integrity of your neighborhood. I would much rather have a space like what we're presenting go there instead of a Red Lobster, a Cracker Barrel, I couldn't even tell you the different restaurants that could be in that location. You talked a little bit about the Waterbury Association. I did try to join, and I was told I was not able to. And we did a full presentation back in September where we provided the square footage. We provided booklets with all the information in it for all the members that were in attendance. And a couple other things that were mentioned. You talked about maybe not knowing about the side patio. We did talk about that a lot on Monday, but they do movies in the credit union lot that just is right. Can't really see it much, but is right over there. So there's movies on the lawn there. They host their Oktoberfest there. So there's a lot of events that they do. Really, kind of surrounding right where we are, where kids do, go. And again, I'm very attentive to making sure that the well-being and the safety of the neighborhood is one of our top priorities. One other thing to note before I wrap everything up is the building currently that is on 6011 is Spectra, and they are currently 5,185 square feet. Our proposed building is 7,000, so it's really not a huge event space. Fowler Ballroom is 40,000 square feet. They're completely two different things. But again, to close, the surrounding properties around there, they knew that there were commercial buildings over here. They bought their properties knowing that maybe something could go in there, but I do want to be a good neighbor, so if there's something that we need to look and review that I haven't seen yet from the neighbors, I'm more than willing to do so. Thank you.
Your rebuttal time's almost done. Okay, so there's only a couple things that got missed there. Landscaping is set by the zoning code. Nothing we can do about that. The buffer is set by the zoning code. So we've already exceeded that with the existing trees, which the only thing that comes out of the existing landscaping are the understory that are doing damage to the overstory. So we will meet, we don't have a choice, we have to meet the landscaping buffer. And the noise is set by the zoning code, and the hours are set by the zoning code. I don't know what else to add to this other than they have to meet it or they're in violation. But the buffer was one thing that I wanted to make sure we addressed. It's set by the zoning code. We have to meet it. Thanks.
Okay, the public hearing is now closed, and commissioners,
Let me weigh in on this. As the audience members have said, this is nothing personal, and we're here to do the best interest of the city of Des Moines. I think the applicant has done an excellent job in presentation of improving a wasted asset, which is taking place currently for 5 years. I think this is a vast improvement. This is consistent with the commercial district on Grand, and as a resident of Beaverdale, we live consistently with mixed use of commercial residences together. And I vote to adopt staff recommendation.
I think the staff's done a better job too, compared to last time.
is that a motion then?
Is
Yeah,
a
you made a motion.
to adopt staff recommendation.
I still have a question about parking.
Go ahead.
Okay. Can you, sorry, I was probably reading all of the material earlier when you were going through your presentation.
Sure.
Can you go over, I've heard several numbers on the parking and what is,
Until we have an exact building with the areas defined and,
Right.
but the calculation currently in the code, which is chapter 135, which is now moved over to the design. It used to be the Board of Adjustment would consider any deficiencies in parking. It's now part of the site plan review procedure, and if they want to appeal requirements under a design alternative, they would end up coming to back to the Plan and Zoning Commission. But the calculation is 1 per 400 square feet for any other office space. Essentially, if they have like catering kitchen or something, that gets an occupant load for the building, but doesn't generate any parking necessarily. But the assembly area then is calculated at 1 per 6 fixed seats. Now the fixed seats, when you have an open seating or a flexible seating situation, we kind of treat that worst case scenario as if you cleared the room and made it standing room only. Under the building code, the occupant load figures that at 1 per 15 square feet. So if we were figuring 1 per 6 of those, that ends up being around 76 if the entire building was assembly. But I think we know, and the zoning condition recommended is not to exceed that. So technically the occupant load could be around 460 some people if it was like this, what somebody brought up the Valair, when you're standing there in the open pit kind of situation. The building code doesn't distinguish whether it's for weddings or for whatever, but that's how it would be looked at, and so that would generate the parking calculation. What staff is suggesting in the staff report is that they not get the benefit of the reduction that's allowed for the MX1 district. Again, that the Plan DSM, and I know somebody spoke to this, maybe to the contrary, that it is the city's intention under Plan DSM to minimize parking and take advantage of parking in neighborhoods and inject businesses into neighborhoods. So the MX is one of those zonings that takes that into account and tries to take advantage of shared parking arrangements and reductions in parking, so we're not creating impervious surface that we have to drain and spend a lot of money to deal with it from an infrastructure standpoint. So, but in this case, because of the proximity to the neighborhood, we think that it probably is appropriate to hold them to the 100% standard as a zoning condition. Then the Board of Adjustment understands that that's a minimum point to start with, just under the zoning condition. Does that answer your question?
sort of?
Okay. Feel free to.
So, well, is 100% would then, because you mentioned,
100% of that minimum calculation that I was kind of laying out there, not the 60% that that we're basically pulling that flexibility of that 60% that they can have if they go to an M1. RX1 doesn't have that, so if it doesn't get zoned to MX1, they will have to demonstrate 100% of the requirement. So.
I mean, most of my only concern about this property is the parking, and I agree that the city is going towards multi-use like sharing parking, which is a great idea. I'm not sure that this area of Grand is at that point yet, even though it does, when you consider properties that are across the street, it does have a lot of parking that isn't used all the time. The idea of people crossing Grand makes me nervous at that point on Grand. I mean, I live right off of Grand as well, but that's my only concern. The other things I'm not super concerned about. I think that they've been addressed.
And looking at the land area available, also staff did not think that the land area was not going to be sufficient to get that 100% parking calculation. So we're confident that the land area is going to provide enough area for them to meet that requirement. So
Has there, and I don't know that you can speak to this, but has there ever been a request to create no parking on those side streets?
So that's brought up. That's regulated differently. I think if there's desire to change how on-street parking is handled on those side streets, that really needs to come through the Traffic Safety Committee, and then it comes as an ordinance in front of the City Council. So like if they want to flip the side of the street that parking's allowed on, for example, so that the flow of traffic is leaving the area as they leave with their parked car, they can look at that as an example. Or if they just believe no parking needs to, there needs to be more no parking, that would be by ordinance through the Traffic Safety Committee. I don't think that the Zoning Commission or the Plan and Zoning Commission can, sort of ask that they take a look at that, or that the neighborhood work with the Traffic Safety Committee to take a look at that. I don't believe you can compel the applicant here to do something if that gets turned down. Yeah, but yeah, it's something that can be looked at, and they may be encouraged to work independently with the neighborhood to get that street parking solution. As a good neighbor, they might work hand in hand with the neighborhood group to look for better solutions on that regard. If everybody moves around, we'll
We have a motion on the
it's
floor.
energy savings, not divine intervention. So.
All right, I'll read the staff recommendation. The staff recommends the commission find the proposed rezoning not in conformance with Des Moines Plan DSM, creating our tomorrow plan future land use designations of park and open space, development control, and low-density residential on portions of the subject property. Staff recommends approval of the request to amend the future land use designation to community mixed use for portions of the property not within the 100-year floodplain designation on the federal insurance rate maps issued by FEMA. Staff recommends approval of the requested rezoning to MX1 mixed-use district for portions of the property not zoned F flood district, subject to the following conditions. Any entertainment assembly use permitted shall provide parking at 100% of the calculated requirement in Chapter 135 of the City Code for such use with any approved site plan. Any business holding a liquor license and/or beer or wine permit shall be prohibited, which is not operated as either an eating and drinking place, restaurant use, at least half of whose gross income is derived from the sale of prepared food and food-related services, or an assembly and entertainment small use that occupies no more than 7,000 square feet of gross floor area for assembly that is operated in compliance with an approved conditional use, including but not limited to hours of operation, sales requirements, and parking arrangements. So commissioners, those in favor, raise your right hand. And those opposed?
So it passes 7-1, and that also passes the land use amendment at the same time, because that requires a minimum of 6 votes.
Okay. Thank you.
I did want to mention, so at the last meeting, they went over the calendar that was potentially for the other item, and they found that the council set the hearing for the 23rd, which was, they pushed it out. So I do want to advise everybody to sort of watch closely. The council would be expected to receive this on March 9th, and typically it would get set for the March 23rd, but they already set the shelter rezoning request for the 23rd, so they might push it out further. I don't want to make any promises, but the typical schedule would put it on the 23rd, but keep a watch out and see where they actually set the hearing, okay? And you can follow that on the city's website when they publish the actions that would be taken on March 9th when they receive and set the hearing. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you all for coming. This evening, we're ready for item number 6.
Nice to see you.
They're not in, it's not like they don't agree.
So if you could please exit the room as quickly as possible so we can continue the meeting.
I guess it wasn't a good practice on their part. But we're not here to judge it once they did it correctly, so that's one of the reasons I tried to continue is to ensure that they love it. So while you can sort of raise that.
Okay. Just curious. And here's the thing. Pretty spring I drive in. We're kind of a piece out there for the neighborhood.
It's late.
Deliberate, or I suspect it was a lack of confidence.
Well, I tell you what, I'd like to do something but I have the sense is that
Are we in now? 8 hours in the last 2 minutes?
well, they didn't. I mean, to me, when you sign off on something, you know what the systems have to do.
I agree. And that's what we just told
Yes, and then when they came to talk about the board, they mentioned nothing about a meeting with the neighbors. They just wanted to meet with the board.
Okay, well then they can do that, but they should have met separately with the board, or separately with the neighbors.
Well, it seems to be that. So to me, that's not.
This one.
Well, but that's.
Yeah, they
not
fixed
their
that.
issue.
Yeah, they fixed it. Yeah.
Well,
I got another item, so.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
That's right. My apologies.
That's all right. I think they wanted a little break.
Okay, we're ready for item agenda number 6. Request from Iowa Homeless Youth Shelters, applicant represented by Toby O'Berry for the following on property located at 2705 East Euclid Avenue. The subject property is owned by the Michael J. Rovner Trust, Cynthia L. Rovner Trust, Michael J. Rovner, and Cynthia L. Rovner. Determination as to whether the requested zoning is in conformance with Plan DSM Creating Our Tomorrow. Amend Plan DSM Creating Our Tomorrow's future land designation from low-density residential to community mixed use rezone property from N3A residential district to RX1 mixed-use district to allow development of the property for a business trade school use and offices for youth training.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, this item is at a location over on just east of I-235 on the south side of Euclid. I'm going to grab my pen here. So the property in question is just east of the corner. I believe this is like a tobacco shop and a pizza delivery place. So it's not developed. There are then single-family houses to the east. This is zoned the same as those single-family houses to the east and to the south of them. But then on the end of the block, there's a commercial center here and the small commercial center there, and then west of there, there's larger commercial development. And then the church is to the northwest, and then more residents to the north. So this does butt up against the same zoning, essentially, that they are, actually the zoning next to them is the MX1 that you're, the MX district, which is different and more intensive, so they're sort of transitioning with this RX1 that allows their use. While they're called the Iowa Homeless Youth Centers, the function here is not for the residential component of that. I believe they're looking for a place to provide training opportunities for their residents and clients, and I'll let them speak more to that, but the idea here is they would want a small building that integrates into the neighborhood for this function of theirs. And the RX1 was the zoning that most approximated what they were proposing to do, so that's the zoning that they have chosen. Staff looked at this overall for the impacts it would create. I know some concern has been raised about abutting single-family residences directly, so they would have to follow the design requirements under the site plan regulations to make sure that they're properly separating things like parking areas and building setbacks to meet that. The new ordinance, of course, as you know, encourages most of the buildings to be brought as close to the commercial street as possible. In this case, Euclid's another very busy street like Grand Avenue, and it's unusual actually to have single family, that loads right onto such a busy street, which is also a federal highway. So while it could be developed as two single-family dwellings or possibly three, under the way it's zoned, that hasn't really occurred over the recent past, so that they're looking at redeveloping it for their purpose. Staff's, again, biggest concern, the intensity of the activity really isn't of concern, and we will, while they're going to show you a nice concept of what they're doing, I want to make sure you understand that you're not approving that concept, that we will have to review it under our design and planning and design ordinance when they submit their site plan. Staff is making a recommendation that the commission not find the rezoning in conformance. The property is shown as low density residential in the Plan DSM future land use plan, so that would need to be amended for them, and they have requested that, and so they would request that the future land use designation be amended from low density residential to the community mixed use, which directly abuts them to the west. And that would allow then for the requested rezoning, which is the R1 zoning. And we did not recommend any specific conditions. We think that the RX1 zoning is narrow enough from a use perspective in this context to support and protect the surrounding residences and commercial properties as well. and we think that the site plan standards applicable are also sensitive to those contexts. The RX1 is a zoning district that again is meant to be against other residential property. So we think that the regulations of the development are going to be sufficient under the way that the planning and design ordinance is already established. So we're just recommending approval. Are there any questions? I will show you the consent map. We had some opposition. I think I had one conversation with the leader from the Fairmont Park neighborhood, which is the south side of Euclid. Oddly enough, the Douglas Acres to the north claims both sides of the street, so there's some overlap here. I won't get into that. I did want to make that clear. So both neighborhoods were part of the notification list, the contacts from both neighborhoods. We did hear from the Fairmont Park, and there is some concern about from neighbors to the south because of this, maybe the scale of the building, that they might end up being an invasion of their privacy. So I guess that's one issue that has been brought up.
What's the, what was the previous zoning of this? There was a card that went through that said that it had been rezoned unbeknownst to the owner?
I think that's the change from, it probably went from an R1 zoning to this N3A when we did the whole city.
Right, okay.
It was C1.
Oh, it was a commercial before? Okay. So this had had a previous then, yeah. I don't have the map to be able to verify that, but I'll take Toby's word for it. I've known him a long time.
It's on page 2, item 8. Yeah.
And Bert was the one that drafted the staff report, so he would have certainly known it off the top of his head. Any other questions?
No other questions. We'll hear from the applicant. Has 10 minutes.
Hello, my name is Toby O'Berry. I'm the director of Iowa Homeless Youth Centers, IHYC. So we work with transition age youth between the ages of 18 to 24, kind of helping them get back on their feet and be self-sufficient. And we really focus on housing assistance, workforce training, employment assistance, education assistance, all the way down to basic need items and kind of case management. For this specific project, what we're really looking to do is we have over 100 youth that we serve that have aged out of the foster care system. So they're 18, 19, 20. We provide 3 years of additional support for those youth that age out. They don't have a lot of stable adults in their lives to help teach them the soft skills for how to get a job. And that's really what's missing with this population of youth. So what this project would be is called the Rooftop Gardens. And so it's a social entrepreneurial business, which would be 2 hydroponic farms, which would be made out of refurbished shipping containers on the roof of this project. And we've partnered with Hyvee, who's agreed to purchase all the produce that we grow at a set price. So we will keep it very small. So there, like they had said, there's no residential housing with this. It's a business that's going to be operated from Monday to Friday. Traditional business hours, so 9 to 5, no weekends, no evenings, just a standard business on this kind of commercial district along Euclid. And so what we're going to have is roughly 3 to 4 employees that will help with like soft skills training and workforce training with the youth that we work with. And then we'll have 4 youth that are in this program at any one time. So the number of people that we will have in that building on average is roughly 8. And the most participants of our programs that'll be on site are 4. It's ideal for us from a location standpoint. It's right along the bus line on Euclid. It's right connected with Hyvee directly across the street. And it's perfect for the use that we have. We had looked at some other sites and other locations. Because of the load factor of the shipping containers, The shipping containers come from a group out of Boston called Freight Farms. So they're fully retrofitted hydroponic farms that will grow over 1,000 plants a week that will harvest fresh basil and thyme in one container and romaine heads of lettuce in the other. There is no way to use existing structures from a load standpoint. You really need to build ground up construction to be able to ascertain and be able to have this on the roof. We had originally looked at our downtown facility for this project, and it was cost prohibitive. And so we've raised $1.8 million for this project, which would be going in and looking at the rezoning and then looking at the construction later this year. With the youth that we serve, it's really soft skills training, so a lot of class time where you're learning how to manage yourself in a workplace setting, how to function with your supervisor, communication skills, and really it isn't for youth to be able to get into kind of the agriculture component, even though this is Iowa and we are agriculture. This is using agriculture as a vehicle for workforce training. The building and the program is self-sufficient, so once it's up and running, it'll generate a positive cash flow for our agency. We won't need any other additional funds to operate. The plants that we sell to Hyvee will generate the cash flow to support the youth in the program and the staffing as well. And like we had said, it was zoned commercial a couple months ago, but I think this is a good concept because it's allowed us to connect with some of the neighborhoods. So we did have a public meeting. Folks from Douglas Acres, as well as Franklin Park, or Fairmont Park, also came to that meeting. We do have some individuals that were a little concerned about visibility, I think. Our project's 2-story, and so the house directly behind us was worried that maybe someone could see into that space. We tried to address that by reiterating that it's only during work hours, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and also it's seasonal. So for the rooftop element, you won't be outside when it's winter time. The shipping containers you will access, you can kind of see from the picture, you will access from the second floor mezzanine on the inside. So when there's snow outside, you won't be going outside on the roof and looking down. And so it's just something that we're trying to build something to be part of the neighborhood. I'm part of the North of Grand neighborhood. I'm part of that neighborhood association. The last thing I want to do is put a project in here that the neighbors don't like. So we're trying to alleviate some of those concerns, and it's an ongoing process. I think we have to prove ourselves to the neighborhood, and it's going to take a little bit of time, but we're trying to build just a business component in a commercial area, but also it's a reason why we went for that transition zoning, knowing we didn't want the high density commercial aspect. We wanted that transition knowing that there's residential that abuts right up next to it. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. The other proponents to speak? If not, are there any opponents to the project that wish to speak tonight? Come up, state your name and address.
Can we sign in afterwards?
Yes.
We don't have to wait? Okay, good. Well, I was just kind of wondering if everybody's awake, you know. I didn't realize that when I got here a little after 6 that it goes that long. Good evening. My name is Jeff Whitty. I live at 2501 Morton Avenue here in Des Moines. I am president of Fairmont Park Neighborhood Association. Toby came and talked at our meeting. It was Tuesday, the February 11th. And he did a very eloquent job talking and so forth. And after he had got done with his speech and so forth, we had some people that wanted to discuss this. And most of the problems, there's 3 things that they needed to be concerned about. First one is the privacy. I don't think there's anybody here that would, well, matter of fact, let me let's show you this. This residence here, they've got a for sale sign in front of their house right now. So anybody that would love to move in next to this, please come and put a bid in for this, so that way you can be spied on too. But I walk this street, the privacy is the big concern for most of the people. And it isn't in the wintertime, because I'll tell you what, the kids aren't out in their little swimming pools in the wintertime. If they are, they got thicker skin than I got, I can tell you. And the residents, they just don't like feeling eyes coming down on them. I know it's only 9 to 5, but that's when people are out. When they're not working, they're out during the day on Monday through Fridays with their kids in their backyards. They all have privacy fences up, 8-foot privacy fences around there, so you know they want privacy. But this is going to disrupt that privacy for them. The second thing is the expansion. I think, is that showing? This area right here is for future expansion. Well, I don't know what the future expansion is. Don't know. These are questions that these residents have. Could it be that they're going to, I don't know, build something else there, want to build something else? And if you look at the parking here, the parking spaces butt right up against their property. So this is stuff that residents on the east side look at. Now, this is their homes. This is where they spend all their money, all their time. And the third thing is, these are men. They're not youths. Youths are anyone under 17 is considered a youth. 18 to 24, these are men. And I'm telling you something, you got young kids and you got men running around, could be a possibility things could happen, especially if they can look over the fence at you. And I'm not saying that's going to be done, but that's concerns of the residents. I spent Sunday walking around Wedgewood Drive, and that's what this is called, Wedgewood Drive down here, talking with the people that were at home, and their concerns were the same concerns. Okay, they're going to have a 3-month rotation of students in here. All right, so every 3 months there's going to be new students, new men coming in, and to teach them. But it's always going to be a revolving thing. Well, we don't know what the background of these students are. I have no idea. The residents don't have any idea. It's going to be a very tough sell to the residents. Also, as Eric was saying, it doesn't fit the City of Des Moines projects. You know, they spend all this time, all this money doing their research on here, and now they want to change it from what it was commercial, and the reason it was commercial is you couldn't sell it. Nobody wanted it. If you go residential and let maybe, I don't know, there's all kinds of builders out there. I think it's 183 feet across. I think you have to have 60 feet in order to, that's 3 plots of land there. That could be on the tax, could stay on the tax. This is a nonprofit. If this gets on, guess what? Taxes are gone. You know, in the City of Des Moines, every time I listen to the mayor and all the city council, what do they say? We only have 50% of the property that we can pay, we bring in taxes. So this is another thing that would happen. Also, on the east side, if you look at on Euclid, we have an empty building. It was the old Quick Trip, which is down just west of the freeway. On Delaware, we have empty buildings. We have a Bauer built moved out. There's a heating and cooling building that moved out. These are all buildings that's already zoned. It just makes sense to do these buildings. They're there. You don't have to do anything.
1 more minute.
Okay.
Comments?
Well, I guess I can't get it all done in 1 minute. But the only thing that I can say is these are the reasons Fairmont Park Neighborhood Association opposes this. I think if it was somewhere else, if it was in a commercial area where it's already there, we would love to have it in our things. So I guess I'm asking you tonight, please turn this down. Don't have these residents. You know, these residents pay between $250 to $300 a month on property tax. Okay, that's a lot of money. And what now? You're going to move this in where they're going to have eyes coming over them, not knowing the people who's going to be there, and not knowing about the expansion, I'm asking you tonight to turn this down. Take it back to the drawing board, because it isn't going to work the way it is right now. So, and one other thing is, I appreciate all your time, you guys. Are you guys taking no dose tonight or something? Because I'll tell you what, you'll all look pretty much awake. So, thank you very much for hearing me.
Okay. Is there anybody else to speak in opposition?
Right on cue.
My name is Jason Carpenter. I live at 3216 East 24th. I'm the vice president of the Fairmont Park Neighborhood Association. I'll keep it brief. You guys have been here long enough tonight. The questions I have on this property is, I don't see anything, I understand it's preliminary, but with the neighbors living right butted against this, I'm sure you're gonna have lighting in the parking lot they're gonna have to deal with. Water runoff, I know, is another concern. As far as once you start paving things, water's gonna run different places. The expansion area, I know, is a real concern. And personally, I would like to see some kind of buffer as far as trees or something put on the south side of the property and on the east side of the property, if in fact you do approve this. We had a cell tower there at the water tower in our neighborhood. They're taking the tower off of the water tower itself, and they're wanting to put a new one in. And the requirements for that was they had to have shrubbery up around it so you couldn't have that eyesore. I would say that would be a requirement. And a two-story building in that area is kind of out of place. It's true there's residents on Euclid like that. It is somewhat unusual, but if you go on over from 2nd Avenue on west, you have residents right there on Euclid there too. So it's not, there's a little bit of mix there, but I'm not real sure this is the thing we want in that area. And like Jeff had said, there's a lot of empty buildings and properties around our neighborhood that could be used for this, and I just don't think this is a good fit for that. And that's all I have. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Now the applicant has 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you. And so Alan, our architect from Simonson & Associates, is going to come and speak a little bit to maybe some solutions that we have maybe for some of those problems. It's interesting because the public meeting that we have, and with the two neighborhood associations that kind of straddle this parcel, Douglas Acres on one hand is fully supportive. So they're signed the card that they're supportive. Their vice chair said, I wish you would put this next to my house, because we have these apartments that are next door. So I have one neighborhood fully supportive of this. Then I have one neighborhood that isn't. And so it's kind of but we still want to make sure we address that neighborhood as well. But I'm trying to address two neighborhoods. It makes it even a little bit more complicated. And have had good meetings with Linda Westergaard. It's in her district. She's extremely supportive of this project and sees the vision for what this could be in this space. But I think we can address privacy. We can address the parking encroachment a little bit and see if we can work on some of those solutions. So Alan's going to speak a little bit to that.
Thank you. Alan Van Gundy with Simonson & Associates. Just to touch on a couple of the items that were brought up, I wanted to acknowledge on the privacy issue a couple different things, actually. The contours that you see on this site plan are 2-foot interval contours, and the site falls to the north and to the east, so this is the low point of the site. Our proposed building elevation is likely to be associated with this contour right here. So when you count the contours back to these homes back here, they are about 10 feet higher than the elevation of our building. So if you consider a floor-to-floor height of 14 feet, that upper patio might be 14 feet above Euclid, but that's essentially only going to be about 4 feet above these homes that are to the south. So that works in our favor. The second thing that works in our favor is the unusual depth of these residential homes. I realize they're about 200-foot deep lots. There's a lot of 200 feet deep lots in the community, but there's also 100, 110, 120-foot deep lots as well. So they do have the benefit of an extra deep backyard. We've done what we can with the site to acknowledge the neighborhood by pulling the intensity of our uses both to the north and to the west. Toward the parking comment, we acknowledge that we have a few extra spaces than what's required by code. I think we would be willing to reduce our parking number to the code requirement or down to 20 spaces. That would effectively eliminate perhaps those 6 spaces, which would pull us away from that south property line another 27 feet. And then in terms of landscaping, obviously we're going to follow the code requirements, and we can certainly concentrate some of that landscaping along that south border and the east border to help mitigate some of that with our trees and shrubs and evergreens. Lighting, similarly, we would be following the code with cutoff fixtures that wouldn't spill over the property lines. So I think there's definitely some design things that we can do to address some of these concerns.
I think also with the population that we serve, so roughly 60% of the youth that age out of foster care that we work with are young women. So this isn't just men that we're working with, and your brain isn't fully developed until you're 25. So these are young kids that are 18, 19, 20 that just need a hand up in life, and we want them to be self-sufficient. We want them contributing back into our community. They're not violent, they're not criminals. They're just youth that lost the lottery of life of being born with a family that's unstable. So we're trying to help them get back on their feet and help them be self-sufficient, and it is a population that needs assistance, but they're not violent and they're not dangerous, and about 60% are women that we work with.
Any questions for the applicant? If not, we'll close the public hearing. And Commissioner, any?
I move staff report adopted. That's my motion.
Any other comments, questions? If not, those in favor of staff, raise your right hand. And unanimous vote. So are there any other reports this evening?
I don't have any other reports. We'll be back at the next meeting. I hope he's enjoying his vacation right now.
Okay, if not, meeting's adjourned.
I missed trivia night.
You're not supposed to be here.
Good job,
I know.
Trivia night.
I drew, and apparently my team didn't do so well.
Sit and read for everybody.
The reading, my voice keeps
Well, I could hear
going
you,
out.
but I could hear you.
Did you come in there?
I did.